Now, a great pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, who's a close friend and partner also of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy for also a number of years now, and I'm very happy to welcome you back to the ICD. We've had the occasion of having a number of Irish delegations here, together with your presence, and Ambassador Mulhall has also been a big supporter of the Young Leaders programs, giving lectures to a number of groups of young leaders, also in the context of high-level conferences, also in last year's Berlin International Economics Congress. So it's really a wonderful tradition. Ambassador Dan Mulhall is currently, of course, the ambassador of Ireland to Germany and has a long career, which I won't go into now, but I'd like to just mention a few highlights, just so you can see again the international breadth of his career. Ambassador Mulhall has had diplomatic postings in New Delhi, Vienna, Brussels, Edinburgh, and Kuala Lumpur, where he was Ireland's ambassador to Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam from 2001 until 2005. August 2005, he was then appointed Director General of the European Union and OECD Division in the Department of Foreign Affairs based in Dublin. And currently, Ambassador Mulhall serves as the ambassadorial representative for the Republic of Ireland in Berlin. The lecture topic that he's chosen is an excellent one and fits in perfectly to today's topic as well as the conference, the topic of the conference, Opportunities for Nation Branding, Ireland's EU Presidency and the Gathering 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for His Excellency, Ambassador Dan Mulhall. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for your words of welcome. Good to be here, as always. I think this is my 5th time speaking here at the Institute now, so I consider myself to be a veteran of the ICD, and I greatly approve of the work the ICD are doing here. I think that cultural diplomacy is an important tool for diplomatic life, diplomatic activity. I'm a great believer myself in soft power, mainly because I don't have any hard power to deploy. So, I have a few. I do my weights every day, but I'm not sure that amounts to hard power. But soft power, I'm quite keen on. For example, I have my Twitter account, which I tweet every day on Irish issues, cultural, political, economic, full range. And my Twitter handle is IRLEMB Berlin. So I'm sure that some of you will undoubtedly want to become followers of the IRLEMB Berlin in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. And thank you for that in advance. I'd also like to say that I'm very much a believer in cultural diplomacy. Our embassy has an active cultural program consisting of lectures, concerts of Irish music, and art exhibitions. We have a wonderful exhibition at the moment by an Irish artist who has taken very close-up photographs of the Irish coastline, not the wonderful vistas of the Atlantic crashing in to the coast of the west of Ireland, but rather small rock pools. And his idea is to show how there's wonderful beauty in nature, even at the micro level, not just at the macro level. So any of you who want to come over and view the exhibition, you'd be very welcome. The embassy is located in the Mendelssohn building, which was the building belonging to the Mendelssohn family, which produced Felix Mendelssohn, the great composer, and it's located on the 2nd floor, and the exhibition is there to be visited during office hours. So, let me start by making a point. It's a key point, I believe, which is that nation branding is a challenge for every country, but especially for small countries. Because now it doesn't mean that the big countries necessarily have the best brands in the world, because a big country can also create resistance, create resentment, its brand can be damaged by developments with which the bigger country might be connected. But nonetheless, the most likely fate for a small country in a world of 190, 200 separate states is invisibility. So the biggest risk, from the point of view of nation branding, is that a country will be ignored and hardly even noticed. And therefore, small countries, I think, have a particular need to present themselves to the wider world so that they avoid this dreadful fate of invisibility, so that they can be seen and appreciated by the wider world. So why do we want to brand ourselves? Why would we want to establish a nation brand for ourselves? After all, you could say that the people of a country can live their lives quite happily in their own communities, in their own societies, oblivious to what the outside world might think of their nation. You might ask, why would invisibility be a problem for the average Irish citizen or the citizen of any country in the world? Maybe you're better being invisible because you don't become a target for the resentment of others. Maybe a quiet life in the sort of sidelines of world history is the best place that a country can aspire to be. But I think you could say that the reason we want to brand ourselves is because all of us, wherever we are in the world, we would like our countries to be recognized for what we think we are. In other words, we would like our own image of ourselves, and I think we all have that image of ourselves, no matter where we live or how small our country might be. And we would like that sense we have of ourselves to be somehow recognized by others. And of course, there's also an economic value to nation branding, because if you are a quiet backwater country that nobody knows much about, your chances of being a major player in tourism, in trade, in investment are probably reduced by virtue of your invisibility. So there is a practical benefit to being seen and recognized in the world. Now, Ireland is a country with 4.6 million people, and are on the island of Ireland, which include Northern Ireland, it's about a population of 6.5 million. So the brand Ireland, which we like to think of as a single brand, and indeed that fact is highlighted here this week by the fact that at ITB, Tourism Ireland has a stand representing Ireland North and South. And this week, I had the pleasure of attending the ITB in the company of two Irish ministers, our tourism minister from Dublin and the tourism minister of the Northern Ireland Executive from Belfast. So we had two ministers representing two political entities, but working together to promote the island of Ireland under a single branding concept. Now, Ireland has a number of advantages when it comes to making ourselves visible in the world. Firstly, we speak English as a native language. And that does make it easier for our writers, our dramatists, our filmmakers, and our pop stars to access and to be recognized around the world as coming from the island of Ireland. A second thing that we have is our global diaspora of people who identify strongly with Ireland. So, for example, the American ambassador here in Berlin is called Philip Murphy. His name is a far more typical Irish name than mine. And he is a representative of that global Irish community of people who have Irish names and Irish backgrounds, whose ancestors, starting 200 years ago, emigrated to the United States, to Britain, to Australia, to New Zealand, to South Africa, to Canada, and even to places like Argentina and other parts of Latin America. So the Irish have for 2 centuries been a people of emigration. They have traveled, they have moved to different parts of the world. And these descendants, today's descendants of Irish immigrants, and there were probably 80 million of them in all, give Ireland a profile in the world that we would not otherwise have. I mean, most people probably know that President John F. Kennedy, who you've studied in your history books, was an Irish American. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Ronald Reagan, another Irish American. Bill Clinton, another Irish American. And indeed, President Obama has Irish roots on his mother's side. His great-great-grandfather was a Mr. Carney, who emigrated from Ireland in the 1850s. And he, the president, visited his family homestead, or the village, which his ancestor emigrated from in 2011, and drank a pint of Guinness in the local pub. There isn't much you can do in the way of nation branding better than that, I can tell you. Anyway, so our global diaspora has given us a profile in the world. And next week, you'll be able to judge for yourselves the reality of the value to Ireland of our global Irish community. Because next week, Sunday of next week, will be St. Patrick's Day, our national day. And for St. Patrick's Day, all over the world, there will be parades and celebrations. And people who have no connection with Ireland will dress in green and will go to an Irish pub and celebrate Ireland's National Day. I would say that not many countries in the world have a national day that's better known or more widely celebrated than ours is. Possibly only the 4th of July and the 14th, the French National Day, Bastille Day, would be more widely recognized or acknowledged than St. Patrick's Day. And St. Patrick's Day is a global phenomenon, not because of the 4.6 million people who live in Ireland, in our state, or the 6.5 million people who live on the island of Ireland. It's because of the 80 million people of Irish descent who live all over the world, descendants of Irish immigrants. These are the people who have made St. Patrick's Day such an international phenomenon. And next week, Fifth Avenue will be closed for the St. Patrick's Day parade. Rivers will turn green in various parts of the US. And not only that, but here in Germany, in Berlin, the television tower at Alexanderplatz will turn green. The Allianz Arena, home of Bayern Munich, will turn green. The pyramids of Egypt will turn green. The welcome sign in Las Vegas, the fountains outside the White House, Sydney Opera House, Auckland Tower, Niagara Falls, Table Mountain. The Leaning Tower of Pisa will become the Greening Tower of Pisa. Okay? And this is just an illustration of how our global Irish family have created a brand for Ireland centred around St. Patrick's Day, which we could never have hoped to achieve without this global Irish family. I would say that the traditional Irish image is relatively positive. You have Irish traditional music, has fans all over the world, notably here in Germany, where every week there are literally dozens of Irish traditional music groups playing our music in Germany and being enjoyed hugely by huge numbers by many, many German fans of Irish music. Every year I get the chance to open Irish music festivals in various parts of Germany, where people who have no family connection with Ireland feel an affinity with us because they like our music and our dance. In Berlin, we have an Irish dance group, Jigs and Reels. They're wonderful dancers. They dance Irish dances brilliantly. When I first met them, I couldn't believe that not a single one of them is Irish or has Irish connections. They're all Germans or from other parts of Europe who have just taken to Irish dancing and are passionate about it. Now, we also have our literature, 4 Nobel Prize winners in the 20th century, possibly the greatest work of literature in the English language in the 20th century, James Joyce's Ulysses, which we celebrate every year on the 16th of June. And if you're in Berlin on that week, please come along to the embassy, where we'll be doing readings from Joyce's great work, and we'll be having songs that are mentioned in Ulysses, and we will have discussions by academics and myself of the significance of Joyce's great work. So our literature has also raised our profile in the world. I mean, we have people from all over the world, Japanese, Chinese visitors who come to Ireland just because they want to visit Dublin, because they've read Joyce's Ulysses and they want to visit the city from which Joyce's Ulysses came. Now, and then we have a romantic history. The history of Ireland is a history of struggle to assert our political and cultural identity and to achieve our freedom, which we did, our independence, which we achieved in 1922. And that struggle, of course, has been reflected in many Hollywood movies over the years, and this again has helped to raise Ireland's profile in the world and help us to avoid the destiny of invisibility or of being overlooked and ignored by the rest of the world. Now, of course, the economic crisis which broke out in 2008 naturally had an effect on Ireland's image, because for years before we had been known as the Celtic Tiger economy. Now, most Irish people didn't really like this phrase, but it was given to us by The Economist, I think it was, and of course everyone started to use it then. It was a very powerful and evocative phrase, and everybody for 10 years in the first years of the 21st century, we became known almost universally as the Celtic Tiger. And when I was in Malaysia and Thailand as ambassador, in Vietnam between 2001 and 2005, everybody wanted to know the secret of Ireland's success. How do we manage to go from being a poor country in the 1950s and 60s to being one of the richest countries in the world in the early part of the 21st century? Unfortunately, the crisis hit us very hard, and while we're still a wealthy and developed country with a strong economy, naturally our image, our reputation in the world took a bit of a beating when we had to apply to the European Union and the International Monetary Fund for support to sustain our country at times when we were unable to borrow from the international financial markets. But now, the image of Ireland in the economic aspect is characterized by a recognition of the comeback we've made. In other words, from our economy shrinking by 9%, imagine it, in 2009, it grew again in 2011 by 1.4%. It grew last year by around 1%. And this year, it will grow by about 1.5%. So we've recovered from the biggest economic crisis in our history, and one of the biggest crises any country has ever been affected by. Because remember, the Irish taxpayer had to cover the losses of Irish banks, which amounted to 40% of Ireland's gross domestic product. Now, any of you, wherever you're from, just try to turn that figure and apply it to your own country. Work out what 40% of your country's GDP is, and imagine how that would have affected your people had they been obliged to pay such a huge amount of their national wealth to save a few banks that had made serious mistakes during the boom. But this comeback story is now the story that I, as ambassador, am proud to tell. It's a story of a country that has dealt with its problems, that has faced them, that has taken hard decisions, and those hard decisions have enabled our country to get back onto the right path again. And for the economists among you, let me give you one statistic, and only one, I promise. In 2011, had you decided to buy an Irish government bond, a 10-year or a long-term Irish government bond, you can buy them on the secondary market, you would have got an interest rate of 15%, because at that time, international investors regarded Irish government bonds as risky, very risky. So you had to be paid 15% in order to take those bonds, to buy those bonds. Today, if you want to buy an Irish government bond, you get an interest rate of 3.8%. Because now international investors take the view that Irish bonds are relatively secure. Our bonds have lower interest rates than Italian bonds, than Spanish bonds, than Portuguese bonds, or than Greek bonds. So we're now only about 2% higher than the bonds interest rates that are applied to German bonds, which are the most stable and have the lowest interest rates of any European country. So this comeback story is an important one because people are interested in knowing how it is that Ireland managed to turn its economy around from the disaster that we faced in 2009 to the challenging but much more positive situation in which we find ourselves today. I also want to talk a little bit about international activity. That's important. It's important that a country that wants to have a good brand be a responsible member of the international community. And in recent times for us, this has meant last year we chaired the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. For the whole of last year, Ireland was involved in trying to broker political advancement in some of the frozen conflicts in the eastern part of our continent. So that was an important opportunity for Ireland, with our own experience of bringing peace to Ireland, to be able to chair the OSCE and to make an Irish contribution to the resolution of conflicts in other parts of Europe. Last year, we were invited to we managed to be elected to the UN Human Rights Commission. We were up against, there were 3 seats. We were up against USA, Germany, Sweden, Greece. There were 3 seats and 5 candidates. Ireland managed to get, I think it was, if memory serves me well, the US got 130 votes, powerful country with huge resources. Germany got 128, Ireland got 127. Sweden got something like 70. So Ireland was elected as a member of the UN Human Rights Commission, which suggests that our standing in the international community remains quite high. Also, we have Irish troops on peacekeeping operations. There's never been a time since 1959, 1960, when there haven't been Irish soldiers serving in UN peacekeeping missions all over the world. And finally, despite the huge problems that we faced over the last few years, our development aid budget has not been slashed. We are still spending 0.5% of our GDP every year on international development cooperation. Two final remarks, if I may. We now have the presidency of the European Union. And our philosophy is that the presidency gives us an opportunity to contribute to the European Union. We have benefited hugely from European Union membership. It has given us access to markets all over Europe. It has transformed Ireland from a relatively undeveloped country in the 1950s and 60s to a fully developed European economy today. The presidency gives us an opportunity to contribute something to the further development of the European Union. What we're doing is we're saying we have experience over the last few years of how to recover from a huge economic crisis. Europe as a whole needs a similar recovery. So we have established as our motto for the presidency 3 simple but powerful words: stability, jobs and growth. And we have focused on trying to learn the lessons from Ireland's experience and to use those lessons and apply them at the European level. And therefore, we are focusing heavily on youth unemployment, on combating youth unemployment, because we believe that youth unemployment poses a risk to the social cohesion of European countries. We are focused on improving the single European market so that we generate more jobs and more growth that will allow young people like yourselves to build lives for yourselves in Europe. And finally, we are trying to exploit the potential of the digital economy. We believe that Europe can benefit in the future from the digital economy. And I ask the question always, why is it that all the major companies from the digital economy, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so forth, are all American companies? Why has no European been able to generate an idea like this? We have plenty of ideas in Europe. Why have we not managed to turn those ideas into major global businesses like Facebook and Google and so forth? And finally, I want to mention the gathering. The gathering, you may ask, what is the gathering? Well, the gathering is an effort on our part to connect with the 80 million people of Irish descent all over the world, and with the many millions of other people in different parts of the world who identify with Ireland. And the gathering is an invitation to all of those people to visit Ireland this year. And there are huge numbers of activities organised in order to ensure that people who come to Ireland this year for the gathering will be sure of a particularly warm welcome. In the Irish language, when we say welcome, we say Céad Míle Fáilte. And Céad Míle Fáilte means 100,000 welcomes. But that's what we say when we're saying welcome. We say Céad Míle Fáilte Rod. Right? So 100,000 welcomes. So we consider ourselves to be a welcoming people. And this year we have a special welcome for our visitors who come for the thousands of events that have been organised by communities all over Ireland to encourage people of Irish descent and people who identify with Ireland to come to Ireland this year, which will also, of course, help in our economic revival. So we hope that the gathering will contribute to our economic recovery. And I finally ask myself the question, what kind of brand do we want for Ireland? My answer is a modern, progressive, caring, tolerant society. We would want to be that for our own reasons. We would also want people outside of Ireland to recognise us for that fact. In his inaugural speech, our President, Michael D. Higgins, who is a poet in the Gaelic language and in English, he said that for the decade ahead, he said that Ireland, he wanted Ireland to open, I quote, a new chapter in its history based on a different version of our Irishness, end quote, and quote, to create a sustainable and prosperous economy and an inspiring model of a good society, end quote. So this crisis, I think, has encouraged us to rethink Irishness, to rethink what it means to be Irish. And the key thing for us will be to preserve those traditional virtues of the Irish, which have given us a positive image in the world, as reflected by the fact that we were elected to the UN Human Rights Commission last year, despite having very few resources to use in pursuing that election result. We want to retain those qualities while at the same time generating an evolving understanding of a new, changing and dynamic Ireland. So I'm happy to answer questions now, and afterwards I'll invite you to have some coffee and some Irish chocolates, some Irish shortbread biscuits, and some porter cake, which is made with Guinness, and some Irish whiskey cake. So I hope you'll enjoy this little taste of Ireland, and as some of you may decide to visit Ireland this year for the gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Because of the following reception, we will only be able to take 2 questions. Please keep your questions focused. Go ahead.
Hi, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your speech. It was very interesting. I'm Lena Campbell, a student here at the ICD. And I was just wondering, you mentioned Tourism Ireland and how it's for the whole island of Ireland. I know they're with ITB and also they're involved with the gathering. Do you think this will open up maybe more opportunities for cross-border initiatives, both tourism and otherwise? Thank you.
Well, of course, Tourism Ireland itself is a cross-border initiative, because in the past we had the Northern Ireland Tourist Board and Board Fáilte, which covered the rest of the island of Ireland. And now we have it, Tourism Ireland in Germany has one office and promotes the island of Ireland. And at the ITB stand, if you go there at the weekend, you visit the Ireland stand, you will see images of Northern Ireland and of other parts of Ireland together in the same place. And you can talk to people from the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin, which is the leading attraction in Ireland, but also to representatives from the Titanic Centre in Belfast, or from the Joints Causeway Heritage Centre, which is a new and exciting attraction in Northern Ireland. So, and certainly we know that tourists who come in to Dublin, a percentage of those tourists will travel to Northern Ireland. And for example, I'll give you one example. Golf tourists. If a golfer wants to play golf in Ireland for a week, they're likely to want to play some of the major links on the west coast of Ireland, Ballybunion, Lahinch, Ross's Point, and then to go up to Northern Ireland and to play Royal Portrush or Royal County Down. So I think these days, when I was growing up, when I was a child, my first visit to Northern Ireland, there was a border, and going across the border was a problem. You had to go through customs and all of that. It was a bothersome business. Now there's no border. For 20 years of the Troubles, you had to at least, people were prevented or were discouraged from going to Northern Ireland because they felt that there might be some security risks, or you were being searched by the police, and people don't like that when they're on holidays. Oh, did you? Yeah, no, I guessed that from your accent. Yeah, but I mean, but the point I'm making is that the best the best thing that could ever happen to North-South initiatives and cooperation in tourism and other areas is the peace process. Because the peace process has made it possible for Ireland to be promoted as a single entity. Because for most tourists, they land on an island, they want to travel around the island, they don't really want to be too bothered about, differences between different parts of the island. Because tourism is a geographical activity, let's face it. It's not a political activity. People go to a geographical region and they want to see everything that that island has to offer. And now I think more and more tourists are being encouraged to and facilitated in visiting the entire island of Ireland.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. My name is Rahma. I am a student of ICD. You said you are planning to increase the job opportunities in Ireland.
Well, in Europe as well.
In Europe as well. Mm-hmm. We have heard from other European countries that they are considering vocational education as the means of increasing jobs. And what about Ireland? Thank you.
Well, I think yes, it is true that that the German model of vocational education is becoming more and more interesting for other European countries. And certainly one of the things we need to do in Europe is to encourage more people to move to different parts of Europe where the job opportunities arise. And in the past, there are two problems with people moving from country to country in Europe. The first is language, where people feel that I don't speak German, I don't think I'd be able to manage in Germany. It's untrue. Most people can learn German pretty quickly, and it's not a problem, I think, coming here, provided you're willing to make an effort to learn the language. I think that will not be a problem. But the second reason that people are inhibited from traveling is recognition of qualifications. And that's one of the things during our presidency we'll be trying to make progress with, the mutual recognition of qualifications. So that if you get a qualification from Germany, you can go anywhere in Europe and that qualification will be recognized. At the moment, there's still problems when you travel from one country to another in having your qualification recognized, and that's very important. So yes, we know, for example, in Ireland, we have unemployment of around 14% now. It's quite high. Not as high as in other parts of Europe, but it's quite high. And many Irish people are now emigrating to Australia and New Zealand and Canada in particular. But we also have a shortage of software engineers because we have a lot of digital economy companies based in Ireland. Facebook has a big operation in Ireland, Google, LinkedIn, PayPal, Dropbox. All of these companies have major presence in Ireland. And these companies need trained people. I saw a figure recently where all over Europe, there's something like 200,000 jobs available for people with the right qualifications, particularly in the software industry. So training and education continues to be a vital ingredient of a successful economic future for Ireland and for Europe. Our people, our Irish people, we have a very high percentage of young people, first of all, by European standards. The average age in Ireland is 33. The average age in Germany is something like close to 50, right? So we have a young population by European standards, not by Asian or African standards, but by European standards, our population is quite young. Secondly, we have a very well educated population because something like 50% of people in the younger age cohorts in Ireland have a university education. So we are well qualified, we're well educated as a people, and we don't want to lose these people permanently. It's no problem if our people go off to Australia or to Germany or to Canada for a few years and they come back with more experience. That's good. But if they leave Ireland for good, forever, that is a big loss for our country, which we as Irish people cannot afford to have. And secondly, Europe needs young, well-qualified people for the future, because if you look at the demographics, the population structure in a place like Germany or other European countries, it's very, very challenging. There's a lot of older people and not enough younger people coming through. We Irish have the advantage of having a young population which will help us in the future, but only if those young people can be given the opportunity to work and live at home, or at least to work and live within the European Union, which is why the mutual recognition of qualifications is so important. It's also why we need to see some economic dynamism in Europe. We need to have new companies emerging in Europe that give people hope for the future, that make people believe that Europeans can create the new Facebooks, the new Googles, the new LinkedIns of the future. And there's no reason why not. I mean, I was in Stuttgart last week. Those of you who are not German, Stuttgart is southern Germany. Now, Stuttgart in the 19th century was more or less a wine-producing place, a wine-producing city with a rural economy. Stuttgart is the birthplace of the international automobile industry, which is now, of course, worldwide. It started in Stuttgart with Daimler and Mercedes-Benz and these companies. Why was it that in the 19th century, the late 19th century, Stuttgart, a relatively undeveloped part of Germany, produced this whole new industry? Europeans must find ways of creating new companies like Mercedes and Daimler and Robert Bosch, all of which came from Stuttgart in the 19th century. And I was talking to the media there last week, and I praised Stuttgart and said, this is an example of what can be done. You have bright people with good ideas and an ability to turn those ideas into practical business propositions. Thank you very much.